What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up, and I am sure that you may have noticed a little switch up in music at the beginning of this episode, and I have a feeling that you may have heard this song once or maybe 300 times over the last 24 hours. Anthony, when we started this show back in 2018, this is a sentence. What I'm about to say is a sentence that I was not sure I was ever going to say while we did this show. The Phillies are in the World Series. We were both there for all three games over the weekend, covering each game. I guess my question to you would be, can you believe it? You saw it, you lived it, but can you believe it?
No, and Bob, I've said this to you, privately. I mean, you know how bullish I was with this team all year. I was the one guy, one of the few people who was like, I still believe in this team. I still buy this team. I still think this team can make a decent run in the playoffs. I did not think they could get. I thought they could get to the NLCS, but I did not think they can get to the World Series. And so for them to do what they've done, and not just do what they've done and like they're just scraping by. They're winning handily. I mean, last night was not handily, obviously, but they're winning games and winning series. They won 4-1 over San Diego. They beat the Braves 3-1. They're winning a lot, and to do it how they're doing it, and it's just one dramatic moment after another. I've never experienced anything like this. There's no real comparison for what we're experiencing right now with the Phillies to anything else that we've experienced in Philadelphia. I've been around for 48 years in this city. Never once have I experienced anything like this, and I find it utterly remarkable. And it's a lot of fun.
I think when you have these generational moments, these things that don't happen, all but once every 10 years, at least not here anyway, you always try to zero in on a moment, like the moment that encapsulates the experience. And obviously, and we're going to talk about that moment because we all know what it was. It was Bryce Harper delivering the go-ahead home run. Just a remarkable moment from a remarkable player. But I'm actually, even the next day, as we record this on Monday morning, even now I'm having a hard time really like hammering down one thing to focus on, one thing to really think about. The whole thing feels like it's happening 250 miles an hour. I mean, after the game last night, we had the fortune of being able to cover it and have the access to be on the field for the post-game celebration and then be in the clubhouse. You know what I did yesterday? And I know that you and I both talked, like, we have to get as much video as we can. We have to get as much up on social as we can. But we came out of the tunnel and we walked onto that field and stepped on the dirt and stepped on the grass. And I made sure I took a moment to just do a 360 around the infield. And it's one thing when you're in the stands. It's one thing when you're in the press box or watching at home to see or hear that many people screaming. But when you're on the field and you just do that panoramic, that 360 view, it was an absolutely remarkable moment to just see a city and see the way that those fans just adored those players. It was like something I had to make sure for myself that I was able to take in. And it was an unbelievable moment. I'm still, like I said, having a hard time even processing that this has happened.
Yeah, it's funny because, Bryce said after, I guess it was game 3 against Atlanta, he's in the press conference and he talks about having chills, right? Just being down there and listening to that crowd and what it's like. And we're sitting in the press box, and like for us, because of where we're situated, we're back in the press box a little bit. We kind of lose a little bit of the crowd, right? I mean, we don't quite. I mean, we hear it, but we don't quite hear it as loudly, I guess, as everybody else does. And we have to have people kind of confirm for us that it is as crazy and nutty as it seems. Then you go on that field last night, and you felt the chills. Like we had nothing to do with the game, right? We had nothing to do with the Phillies' success, but yet you walk onto that field. And that crowd is singing and cheering and everything. And to be down in that bowl like that, like in that fishbowl kind of experience with 46,000 people screaming and partying and chanting and everything else. And it's like, now you understand. Now you get it. Now you see. And that was just the celebratory parts. Imagine the moments like Harper's home run, like Rhys Hoskins' home run, like Suarez getting the last out, like any of those things. Imagine the moments and what those must feel like. If we could feel it just in the afterglow, what do they feel in the actual moment? And that's just what's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I believe that Nick Castellanos called it euphoric. I believe that appeared in Matt Gelb's story this morning. And, I think that may be the perfect word for it. And, I guess as we sit here and talk now, I think about all of the different storylines that unfolded and all of the different storylines that have played out and all the things that we can talk about. Rhys Hoskins, can you remember a crazier postseason for an individual player, just the highs and lows? Ranger Suarez, who really became this dual threat guy at the end of last season. We saw him close by the time July rolled around last year because the bullpen was so bad. And then he becomes a starter. He was sort of up and down at different points this season. And he goes out and throws a great game on Friday night and turns around less than 48 hours later to close the game out. Like a crazy story. Bryce Harper, I'm fascinated with the Bryce Harper story, and I guess it's hard not to be.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that I keep thinking about isn't just that, like, oh, wow, this is a great player, or wow, look at this guy be able to own a big moment. It's that from the time he was 16 years old, baseball as an industry was fascinated with him. I mean, listen, LeBron James is an international superstar, and to compare LeBron James to Bryce Harper is probably that's unfair. That might be a little bit of a reach just because of everything else that goes into the image of LeBron James. But in terms of the way that he was followed and the way that the industry, for what it was, focused on him as a kid, as a 16-year-old, it was because he was a prodigy. He was the next great thing. He was going to somehow change or revolutionize baseball, become the face of it. And he was a damn good player for a very, very long time. MVPs, multiple MVPs. He met the hype, but he needed that moment. He needed that run. He needed that swing to, I think, really validate the hype and the way that he was just followed and analyzed and thought about so long ago. And yesterday, that was the final box. I know he hasn't won a championship yet. We'll see what happens. We'll get to that. But I really just felt like that is a moment that only a legend has. You sometimes you have those role players have those moments in the postseason. But really, when you're talking about a guy that's supposed to be the guy to play as well as he did, and then to cap it off with that swing, unfucking believable.
And he didn't believe it either. I don't know if you saw the video of him saying, "I can't believe I just did that." Like, I mean, he actually says that in the dugout as he's taking his batting gloves off and his helmet off. He's talking to, I think it was Hoskins he was talking to. He goes, "I can't believe I just did that." I mean, he even surprised himself with that home run yesterday. You're not far off, though, with the LeBron thing. I mean, the only difference is basketball is more of an international game than baseball is. And so, I mean, yeah, he has a bigger following, but I think that there's some international following for Bryce Harper. I think, we see the Japanese media that are there at the ball game, and the Korean media that's at the ball game, and we have all the Hispanic reporters that are there from different countries. So, I mean, like, this matters.
Well, certainly it's an international game.
Yeah.
I just think that Bryce Harper is I don't want to even want, it's not even about like a national focus. It's just that I feel like, LeBron is just, he's a global brand.
I'll tell you what Bryce Harper needed. Bryce Harper needed Philadelphia as much as Philadelphia needed Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper ends up with the Nationals, which is I don't know how many times you've been to games down there. I mean, I used to live in DC. It's a transient town, with the exception of the football team, and even that nowadays they don't have the following that they used to. Nobody down there ever really cared about the other sports that much. The Capitals, the Bullets / Wizards, and then eventually the Nationals. Like, it was just kind of like they were just there. They were just kind of part of whatever. Maybe some your politicians will come over and see the game one day. Oh, let's take a day off from work and go whatever. There were no fans. It was very corporate. It was a corporate entity. And I think Bryce needs to fuel himself with a situation that are like what arose yesterday.
Right.
He needs to fuel himself with that. And I don't think he ever really had that. First of all, he was young in Washington. And we saw some of the brashness with him, obviously going at it with Papelbon, right? I mean, we saw that whole thing. But he needed to be in a location where he could embrace not just the moment, but the people and everything else as much as the people could embrace him. It had to be symbiotic. And there's only a few places in this country where that would have worked. Philadelphia happened to be one. And thankfully for Philadelphia, Bryce Harper chose here.
What I've thought about with him, and I actually talked to you about this over the weekend. He comes here, and I think that he was under the impression that Philadelphia is a place to be, like you're talking about. Like, this is a place with this electric fan base. It's going to fill up all the time. We're going to have so many big wins here, and I'm going to have my stature elevated because I did it in this city, and it didn't happen like that in 2019 and in 2020, certainly, with everything that happened, falling short a couple of years in a row. And I wondered if things did fall apart down the stretch this offseason. I don't think we would have been quite there yet going into 23. Because, listen, John Middleton has spent the money. The organization is doing the right things. Let's pretend that this run didn't occur and they just got bounced in St. Louis. I think that once you take a deep breath, you would still say that the Phillies are trending in a positive direction. You feel good about what's coming down the line with the pitching staff and, Andrew Painter and Mick Abel and all of that. But I do wonder if Bryce Harper's head hits the pillow and kind of go like, did I make a mistake? It's been 4 years. I haven't won here. The crowd hasn't been as electric as I thought it would be. And now all of that gets wiped away. I mean, what we've seen here, I think, is a validation of his decision to come here. And I think what we've seen is the fans really rise to the occasion. I think that this fan base is going to be gripped by this team now moving forward. I think they needed, as I've said multiple times, these postseason moments, this run to really re-engage with baseball at full bore like they did from 2009, really, after the World Series last time, through 2011 and 2012 even. I think that has now cemented the relationship between this organization and this city, and it's going to really rejuvenate the sport and the way that people feel about it. They woke up these past 3 weeks and realized, like I said before, oh shit, this is amazing. This team can make a city feel this way. And that's what we've seen play out here.
It is. And it's just awesome, Bob. And I know you and I, especially in at Crossing Broad, we're the baseball guys, right? I mean, we're the guys who people always give us grief about baseball being a dying sport and nobody cares about baseball, right? We have to sit there and listen to the BS in there. And then it's fun to sit in that Slack chat and watch every one of these people get caught up in this, right? Every one of our colleagues getting caught up in it and loving the Phillies right now and loving the run that they're on. And we see it in the city. And I had this conversation actually on the elevator yesterday before the game. I was riding the elevator up to the press box and was talking with oh my God, why I can't freaking is it Rob Ellis from WIP? Rob Ellis is and I are going up the elevator, and I said to him, I said, Rob, I said, is this town a baseball town? And he said, yes, it is. He said, I've always believed that. I said, so have I. I've always believed this is a baseball town. Obviously, the team has to be good. Can't be bad. Nobody will go. We saw that, right? I mean, the fans didn't attend. And things were so bad for so long that they were really arm's length even this year down the stretch, right? We were like, why aren't more people coming? There's only 25,000 people here. They're in a playoff race. But once you show them that you matter, and once you show them that baseball is alive and well, this city goes bonkers. Not to say that it's more than football, because I would never go that it's more than football. There are times it can be more than football, but on the whole, it's not. But I do think that when good baseball is being played and the team matters, that it is on par. It is equal to the excitement about the Eagles. And it's more, and the reason is, and to be fair, I want to be fair about it. The reason I say that and the reason that it works that way, when people care about baseball, there's a different game every night. Right. And so there's always something new to talk about. Right. Football sometimes can get stale because you play one day and then you have to talk about the same thing for 7 days until they play again, right? So that's why it's like, oh, here we go again with the you listen to talk radio, it's like, they go with the Eagles again, blah, blah, blah. And why aren't they talking about the Phillies? Why aren't they talking about the Sixers or the Flyers, whatever? And that's why it gets repetitive and it gets tough. But baseball, when it's good and you care every day and you're invested every day, there's nothing that matters more in this city.
Yeah, and this is an easy team now to kind of connect with, and it's an easy team to really jump on and feel strongly about. I mean, and which is crazy, because if I would have said that 6 weeks ago, people would have said it's virtually impossible to connect with this team. But you know, there is an element of this, and I don't want to come across like snobbish or elitist or anything like this, but like there is a little bit of a, well, you know, a lot of people that are on for the ride right now are just kind of learning what has been going on here. You know, like there's a great section of Phillies fans that are diehards that have really followed and lived this thing since, you know, the first World Series run, from the time they were born, whenever it may have been. But there are a lot of people that kind of really just detach themselves from this for probably the better part of a decade and are coming back now. And that's great, right? Like you need those people.
Well, I'll tell you what you need more than anything. How old were you when the Phillies were on their run in 07 to 11? Early 20s, right?
22, 23, yeah.
Okay, so you were a young adult, right? And it was a cool thing.
Yeah.
Right? It was like you could go out with your friends, you could go to the bars, you could celebrate, you could have your drinks, you can go crazy if you want, you know, get a little nutty, right? I mean, and that's kind of like, it was an event. Every game was an event, and it was a fun thing to do. Then you go for 11 years where that doesn't happen. So the people who are that age now, they were what, 9, 10, 11 years old when the Phillies won the World Series? And I'm sure it was exciting and fun for them as kids, right? Like that's awesome that you win as a kid. But there's nothing better than winning when you're a young adult, right? I mean, that's the best time.
You're absolutely right. I mean, listen, I got out of college and they won the World Series. My first year working as a professional, they had gone on that run in 08. And I mean, my first paychecks it just literally came into the bank account and went to Ticketmaster. Like, I mean, it was just, it should have just been a straight transaction. I was a middleman in that whole thing. And it was unbelievable. I mean, some of the best times of my life, some of the best nights of my life were down there with my friends, you know, having beer dumped on us at, you know, McFadden's at the stadium post game. I was fortunate enough to be in the stands for a lot of those games. Just unbelievable moments, things, conversations, people. I'll never forget those moments, you know?
Right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people now, a new generation of people are finally getting to experience those moments as well. And it's been really cool for, you know, for even me, for older people to see that. You're like, now you get your shot, you know, and that's really cool. It's a shame that a whole generation had to go by before that happened, but you know, here we are.
But I saw it last night, and I told you I went over to Xfinity last night. I wanted to get a little bit of video. I would have stayed longer and gotten, you know, Schwarber riding the bull and other stuff, but they were late getting there, and I didn't want to stay. I was in a long enough day as it was, but they started filtering in. I guess it was Nick Nelson shows up at like 9:15. I guess he was like the first one in. And he's there with his wife, I guess his wife and daughter, who is maybe 3-4 years old. This little cute little blonde girl. And they're up on the upper level. And he brings her to right to the edge and tells her to wave down to the crowd. Now, we're talking about 1,000. I'm going to say 1,000. I assume that's what's in there, right? Maybe even a little bit more. But 1,000 people, all 95% of whom are under the age of 26, okay? And all of a sudden, they're waving to this little girl, drunk off their ass, right? But waving, like it was like the cutest little thing. Like they weren't obnoxious. They weren't like what you would think. They were just like, hey, this is awesome for that little kid. We're going to wave to that little kid. And then, of course, they all start filtering in, and the place is going nuts, and it's a party. And I'm looking around, and I'm saying, they were all kids the last time this happened. They were all little kids. Everybody in this building was a little kid. Like, now they get to experience it. Maybe this is a renaissance for baseball in this town. And like it was in 07 to 11 or 12. I mean, I guess it was a renaissance then. I think we're going to experience it now, because this team's not just going to go away. It's not a one trick pony, right? I mean, this is going to be a team that's going to be competitive for a few years. This is a baseball renaissance in this town, and that's awesome.
Yeah, it's probably not the day to talk about 2023, but I mean, when you really step back and look at how this is all played out, this wasn't supposed to be a World Series year. You felt like, get into the playoffs. That's step one. Yeah. And then we'll take the next step. Oh, they're here now, right?
Yeah. So, well, it kind of reminds me of when Gillick said in 08, this isn't our year. Next year is the year that we're – and then they go ahead and win the freaking whole thing that year, right?
Right. So I think the one thing now that we talk about as we start to kind of digest everything that has happened, let's I don't want to get to the nuts and bolts of the games that much, right? Like, and maybe some people are listening to this because we typically will do that. But I think it's more of a day of just talking about the importance and the significance and the moments and all of those things. But there are two things. I mean, we've already touched on Harper and the swing and the situation and just how a player that's that highly regarded can perform at that level. The one thing I want to say is that there's like 5 people on the planet that can perform at that level consistently and then have that type of moment on top of it. Yeah. I mean, it was just like, from just a human standpoint, forget like he's a Philly, what it means to Philadelphia. It's amazing to watch somebody be so good at something and have the mental focus to be able to perform in a moment of that magnitude. It's a marvel to watch a human being perform at that level in anything. It's just amazing.
Maybe. I'm not there yet, because he has to win it. To me, I think he has to win a championship. But maybe the best baseball player in Philadelphia Phillies history. I'm not being crazy with that either. Like, Schmidt's still ahead of him, but only slightly, Bob. Only slightly, and that's because of the success Schmidt had. 3 MVPs, won a championship, right? Whatever, 548 career home runs. But what Harper's doing is no one's ever done here before. So he might be.
So the fact that Harper did what he did, one of the things I can't help but think about, there are 2 things that I really point to that even allowed that moment to happen. And it's not JT Realmuto, who, by the way, deserves a ton of credit for starting that inning with a base hit.
Yep.
But that aside,
a 2-strike hit, no less.
Yeah, a great at bat. There are 2 things that I just can't get over. Number one, I guess it kind of at the time felt like it was an excuse or crying over, making an excuse, crying over a situation. But can you believe that they played through that 7th inning?
It was remarkable. I can't. It was so bad, and it was like, what the hell is Major League Baseball thinking? And I kind of know what they were thinking. Like, shit, we don't have the extra day here, right? We don't have the day off built in. And we really don't want to go late into this night, because if the Padres win, we got to fly back to San Diego, and it's a cross-country flight, and they got to play tomorrow night. So that's what they're thinking. Like, we got to freaking play. So the frustrating part to me, Bob, and I said it to you yesterday, was because it happened twice. Well, why can they fix the field and take the time to do all the things that they need to do when the Padres are about to pitch and field, but when the Phillies are pitching and fielding, sorry about your luck?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the mind-blowing part to me. Yeah. It was like, keep it even, guys.
Yeah, and I mean, you heard it. I'm sure you saw the stat yesterday, especially if you're a Twitter person, but Sir Anthony Dominguez, 54 appearances this season, 51 innings pitched, 3 wild pitches. And he just so happens to uncork 3 all in the same frame, which essentially gifted the Padres a go-ahead run. And, listen, I don't know what would have happened had the Phillies gone back to San Diego tonight. I had the Phillies in 6. I actually think Aaron Nola would have pitched well, and I think the Phillies probably would have won the series in 6. They were the better team. But you never know.
Right.
And the one thing I said to you, I said, listen, I don't know how this is going to play out. I hope this is not how they lose this game, though. I hope that this isn't the storyline. Here we go. Major League Baseball, the baseball gods. Like, you don't want to invite those obstacles into the path. And for them to kind of just blow through the obstacles and just mow through them, I thought was really important. Now, the Harper at bat itself, he gets behind early in the count and he lays off speed. Like, if you go by and watch that pitch by pitch sequence, he lays off speed low in the zone. How many players on the planet, after seeing 98, 99 belt to chest high, are diving there and not, and staying off that pitch? Really, really impressive. I know that Suarez had not allowed, and Bob Melvin pointed to this after the game, Suarez had not allowed a homer to a left-handed hitter the entire season, but he also did not face Bryce Harper, who was playing with his hair on fire in an electric moment all season. And that brings me to this point of it. Looked at you, and we saw Josh Hader warming up in the bullpen in the 8th inning, and he wasn't ready yet. And after the game, Bob Melvin talked about, well, we weren't going to get 2 innings out of him. Why not? How do you not deploy Josh Hader in that situation against Bryce Harper? I thought it was baffling. And if you weren't going to get 2 innings out of him, that was going to be your high leverage point of the game. You had the middle of the Phillies order up. You get through that. And if you had to go to somebody else in the 9th, then so be it. But in that spot, man, I just don't get it.
Well, we also talked about the possibility of Hill coming in, who's also a good reliever, left-handed, sidewinder, tough to pick up, right? I mean, either one to me would have been a better option than Suarez. What I think was more impressive about Bryce, and we were talking about it a couple of pitches before the home run, is he's getting fastballs away because Suarez doesn't want to put it into his wheelhouse, doesn't want to give up the home run. And he's like, look at the way that they're playing him. They're giving him the third base line. They're giving him just a base hit. You get a base hit. Real Muto goes to third. Then you have first and third, nobody out. All you need is a fly ball to tie this game. That's what you and I were talking about. And Harper, you could see twice, tried to do that. He actually tried to go the other. He fouled off both of them, but he was trying to go the other way, And I think that those 2 swings on fastballs away sets him up to hit the home run to left center field. Because then all it takes is for that ball to be just a little bit further in and for that swing to be a little bit better timed. And as professional hitters, they can, like you've said, they can time a jet plane, right? And hit it on the nose. Those 2 swings, I think, were imperative to him hitting that ball. Now, like John Middleton told us last night, he thought it was going to be a double off the wall, which would still been good enough, right? I mean, that would have gotten Real Muto home, would have been a huge hit. But it was just fascinating, and I can still remember sitting there. Like, I think I may have yelled it, Bob. I may have yelled it. I think I yelled, he got it.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there like bracing it, and then you're on my left and Chris Murray's on my right, and Chris Murray hits me in the arm. He's like, "Oh no!" He got it. And you're like, "He did." You're like, "He did." We're going. It's like things you don't do in a press box. But how can you not?
Yeah.
How can you not?
My reaction, like, I'm very cognizant of the fact. I mean, listen, we've talked about this on the show a million times.
Yes.
Like, I love the Phillies. Come on, man. I grew up in this, I grew up in South Jersey. I don't want to say I grew up in the city, but I love the Phillies. Like, my family loves the Phillies. All my friends love the Phillies. I'm getting text messages left and right. People going absolutely crazy, right?
Yep.
And I'm always very cognizant of, like, listen, yeah, I mean, I grew up as a fan. I think I play it pretty professional. Like, I don't go down there and fanboy it. If you didn't know me personally, you wouldn't say this guy's a Phillies fan. Like, you wouldn't know.
Right.
But in that moment, my reaction, like, I kind of like gave you like the elbow. Like, I gave you like, holy shit.
Yes.
It was more like, I can't believe that this player did this thing in this moment as so much as it was like, go Phillies. It was just like can you believe that this guy did this? And it was just an unbelievable moment.
Bob, 22 years of covering professional sports in this city. I've never reacted like that once. I was a huge Flyers fan as a kid growing up, and I've seen many great Flyers goals, playoff goals, right? I mean, that won games, like unbelievable goals and whatever. Never once responded because I think that the moment was that special last night. And not only that, I'll tell you what, it's funny that I mentioned this to you very briefly yesterday, but earlier this summer I was bored and I said, I'm going to do the best 50 calls in the history of the Phillies. And I got to completely revise the list because
you got a few to add. I mean,
Fransky's been unbelievable here in the playoffs, but Bedlam at the bank is going to be stairs rips one into the night. We're going to remember the words Bedlam at the bank. That's Bryce Harper's home run.
Praising Scott Fransky for a big call and a big moment is nothing new. He's been great at it for so long now, and it's almost the expectation. It's Harper hits the home run, and you say, we got to get the Fransky call. It's almost like an instantaneous reaction to what we do, especially, working with Crossing Broad. But I'll tell you what, we as a city tend to we are very slow to give national broadcasters credit. And I tweeted this today. Joe Davis is 34 years old. 34 years old. And he's already the number one Fox broadcaster once Joe Buck went to ESPN. And so I guess you could already say he's the man, he's a star, but he's not a household name as a broadcaster. And let me tell you something. He is a guy for the next 15, 20, 30 years that I think is going to just cement himself as one of the better broadcasters.
I agree.
From a national perspective. And in that moment yesterday, not only you get the electricity fuels the call to begin with, but the swing of his life. We talked about Bryce Harper being this prodigy as a 16-year-old and all of the expectations and all of the eyeballs that followed him around and the MVPs and everything that he's accomplished already to this point in his career. But the swing of his life is just such a perfect call for that particular player because of everything that goes into what he is and what he's been and the hype and the expectation. And it was, right? Like it was the swing of his life. What a perfect call in that spot from a national broadcaster, an all-timer as far as I go. Was it stairs rips one deep into the night? I don't know. Maybe if the Phillies go on to win the World Series, in hindsight, we put an extra point or two on the call, but I thought he crushed it, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for it.
I agree with you. And I know a lot of people were, a lot of fans were on the national broadcasters for Fox. They think John Smoltz was favoring the Padres and Davis. I think that those two are sensational.
Yeah, Joe Davis wasn't favoring the Padres. He comes from the Dodgers organization.
Right.
Like, if there was anybody to not favor the Padres, it would be Joe Davis.
Right. I think that those two are phenomenal. I think John Smoltz is clearly the best baseball analyst, national baseball analyst there is. And Joe Davis, you're right, has quickly cemented himself as the best baseball broadcaster out there.
I agree on Smoltz. I will tell you, I always think, I've always defended Joe Buck. I know a lot of people probably listening to this.
I like Joe Buck too.
Instantly rolling your eyes. Like, Joe Buck was against us in 2008. Like, no, he wasn't. Like, he really, I promise you, Joe Buck wasn't against Philadelphia. Now, I did think that his calls sometimes during that run in 2008, like, lacked energy. Like, I thought he crushed the stairs call. I thought he did a good job with the Utley Deke play against the Rays. Yeah. Like, he had his moments. But, okay, if you're not in love with Joe Buck, that's totally fine. I think he's great. I'm not someone that you typically will crush national broadcasters, but I will tell you with Smoltz, I agree with you in principle that he's very good. He may be the best analyst, and I respect his ability to talk through pitching. I do think, however, he overdoes it sometimes. Like, you can let it breathe. You don't have to give us the thought process of the execution of every individual pitch. And I also felt like in Game 1 against the Padres, I tweeted about it at the time. Yu Darvish is a very good major league pitcher. I mean, we were overdoing it a little bit in Game 1, I thought. It was like just this total like love fest. And not that he was rooting for San Diego, but I'm like, dude, all right, like we understand.
No, I get that. I get that. And that's fair. And that's fine. I tend to like guys that are like that. He's become a caricature of himself, but I kind of liked Tony Romo when he first came on as a broadcaster, being able to tell you what was going to happen. Right. Like reading the defense and tell you, here's what's coming. And I know that people hate it. Some people
be a run to the left, Jim.
Yeah, I know some people hated that, but I loved it. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, this is like This is what I wish we've had for years, that someone would come up there and kind of explain this. So what are you seeing, that tells you that this is going to happen? It makes you smarter as a fan. And I know A-Rod is so volatile. There's times when he's just flat out bad, really bad. But he is another guy who has moments where he can predict something, where he can say, all it takes is this, and if you do this or whatever. But like, he was the one who found what was going wrong with Harper before he got hot.
Right.
And just talking about the difference between his legs and his upper half, and what does it mean to be in between? It means that you're behind on fastballs, but you're way out in front on the breaking pitch. I think that's educational for fans, and I don't have a problem with that. That said, Davis and Smoltz versus anybody else who's been, if you've watched any other games, on whether it's on Fox or TBS or ESPN, no matter what you got, I don't think that there's a comparator. I think that they are so far ahead, it's not even funny. And I hope that I guess they're doing the World Series, right?
I would imagine so. I mean, I'm looking at the schedule right now, and we're game 1, Fox. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think we're looking at probably an 8:07 start on Friday night. I know it's not official yet, but that's probably what we're looking at.
Yep.
I mean, listen, we're 36 minutes into this show, and we have not – I mean, there are so many different things that we could talk about, and we're just not going to get to them. I mean, check the boxes real quick. Zach Wheeler, unbelievable.
Yep.
The timeliness of the hits. Even when guys weren't, like, on, you look at some of the numbers through the course of the 5 games, and you go, well, he didn't really hit all that well. JT Realmuto, the numbers aren't great. Nick Castellanos, the numbers aren't great. Bryson Stott. I mean, just what else can you say? Like, and the last thing I want to do is like sit here and like pat ourselves on the back, like, oh well, we had a take 2 months ago and we got it right. But have you ever seen a guy that hit 234 during the regular season? Has been, I don't know if he cracked 200 with the hit yesterday. At one point though, I'm looking at Saturday night, he's hitting like 189 in the postseason, and I'm saying to myself, like, these numbers are so unimpressive, yet I'm so incredibly impressed with this kid as a player. I mean, he's 25 years old. Like, we treat him like he's 20, but he's a rookie. And he just, for a guy that has not played that much at the major league level, who's still a relatively young player, the guy just has brass ones, man. Like, it's almost to the point where, like, Harper is a different story. But if there's like a big spot where you want a guy up, it's him. They blow the lead yesterday in the 7th inning, and what does he do? And I know they didn't end up scoring there, but boom, double, like right away, like just without flinch. Had the opposite field hit the night before. That was a big part of it. Just an unbelievable player, just a big time player.
Did you see the quote, by the way? You mentioned that you're talking about saying he's got brass ones. Did you see the quote from Zach Eflin yesterday?
No, I saw him tell John Clark, like, let's fucking go.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay, this was from, I believe it was a Comcast story. I want to make, or a NBC story. I want to make sure that I want to make sure I gave it to the right, give credit where it's due. I think it was from one of the NBC sports stories. He says, that's what's great about this team. I probably shouldn't say this, but we play with our balls. We don't play with our head. We definitely expect to get outs. We expect to get hits, and we expect to score more runs than the other team. We're pumped to win 4 more. So think about that for a second, right? And that kind of talks about exactly what you're saying. Some of the numbers aren't great, except for Harper. But if you're out there balling, as he's saying, like Rhys Hoskins, for example.
Well, that was where I was going. Actually, when I started talking, I sort of derailed myself. I detoured into Bryce top, but I said, how the hell have you had a show here and not talked about Rhys Hoskins yet? So I guess now is the time.
Yeah.
We all know the story. The Phillies are in the World Series here, and so we're going to have some new listeners. Like we've looked at the metrics. Things are going very well for the show lately. So if you've been listening over the years, you know where I'm at on Rhys Hoskins. Great guy. I'm rooting for him on a personal level. I think he's a very flawed player. The streakiness drives me crazy. I've wondered in the past, not unfairly, I don't think either, is he a winning player? Like, is he a guy that can step up in big time moments? And then you see the way that he starts this postseason and you go, come on, man, you know? And even after the home run against Atlanta last week with the bat spike, you would have thought like that is his big moment. Like that goes down in Phillies history. That cements, that stabilizes everything with this guy. And then the next series starts and you're like, oh, God, like the defensive miscues and like just not hitting again. You're like, come on, man. Well, here we are now. And I don't know that I can ever recall a weekend that was more turbulent, more of a roller coaster for a player than what Rhys Hoskins had. And I know that we did this story on Gene Segura on Friday night, like the redemption story, like bad play, great, great at bat. Like you're the hero after the GOAT. But I mean, the Rhys Hoskins version of that is Segura on steroids.
Yeah.
Weekend.
No, it is. And I've always liked Hoskins more because I believe in his bat. And I know that he's streaky. I know that drives you nuts. But I know over the course of a season, if you look at a lot of players that put up his kind of numbers, they have their streakiness, right? I mean, maybe he's a little bit more streaky than most people. When he's hot, he's unbelievably hot. When he's cold, he's unbelievably cold. But in the end, he produces good numbers. I mean, in comparison, like I did a thing on him where where he ranked amongst first basemen in baseball, and he's like seventh. In a lot of categories, sixth or seventh in a lot of categories of all first basemen in baseball. So if you have the sixth or seventh best offensive first baseman in the sport out of 32, you're happy with that, right? I mean, you should be happy with that. That said, man, his defensive miscues kill me. Man, it's like I mean, they're such simple plays, and it's bad footwork. It's falling on your ass trying to catch a ball at first base. Like, it's a position I played when I played baseball. It's a position I play as an old man playing old man softball. And I sit there and say, I don't look that bad now. In the field at 48, I don't look that bad.
You heard it here first, everybody. Anthony St. play a tighter first base.
I can't believe on this, like that one hopper to his glove that he misses the other night. And I'm like, it's a routine play. It's routine. And so that stuff drives me crazy because it's fundamental.
Well, I will tell you,
that said, he's a legend now. He's
become a legend. I mean, one of the things that you look at when a team stinks and stinks for a long time and you get these breaths of fresh air, Rhys Hoskins comes up the way that he does and he kind of gives you some hope. You're like, wow, here's a homegrown guy that has some big time power and maybe he's going to be part of the next core that wins. And then the team disappoints and he struggles at key moments during a lot of those September collapses or whatever you want to call them. And you start to question, like, is this guy a winning player? Is this guy going to hold a trophy on a podium one day? And I think it became harder to see that as time progressed. And then you blink, as recently as maybe the beginning of this month, you question whether or not he'd be that guy. Or maybe at different points during this postseason run. And then you blink and you see that he powers them to where they're at today. They don't get to this point without him. They don't make this run. Bryce Harper does not have the opportunity to just create this epic legendary moment without what Rhys Hoskins did. And he now forever, no matter what happens, no matter if he comes back, they trade him, he becomes a free agent and goes elsewhere, he stays here for another 8 years. And we could talk about that. I know now's not really the time to talk about the future, but one thing that I did posit at the beginning of this run was, if they make this crazy postseason run and get to the World Series, and he is part of the equation that drives it there, does it alter his future in this city? And I don't know the answer to that. I do wonder, though, if you start to get swept up in the moment. I didn't think he was long for Philadelphia. I didn't know if it was going to be a fit moving forward. I do wonder, though, after this weekend and the way that this all played out, if he's not, maybe he is back. I don't know. I guess we'll see, but he is now cemented himself as, I don't know if he's an all-time great. He's going up on the Wall of Fame one day. I'll tell you that much. I mean, we know that now, and I don't know that we would have known that a week or two ago. But he's a Wall of Fame player now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, he hit 4 home runs in this series in the NLCS. Now, how many guys do that? How many guys hit 4 home runs in the league championship series? Not many.
Yeah.
Not many. Rhys Hoskins did.
And a good, like, feelings aside, not everybody's a good guy. Some teams have some really bad guys and you end up rooting for them anyway because they're your team.
Yeah.
But he's a guy that I've always just felt like this is a really solid dude. Like a really good dude that when things aren't going well, you feel for him a little bit. Like that. I think that's always been for me, like, and as I've gotten older, I think I've gotten a little bit smarter. Like when I was a 23-year-old make an error, I'd be like, you got to get rid of this guy, stinks. You know, you start to kind of balance out a little bit, I think. And you realize, like, listen, you're not going to make every play. You're not going to get a hit every time. I just looked at him though, and I was like, I'm truly on a personal level happy for the guy. You know, it meant a lot to him. You know, he's been through a lot. He's obviously been here when things weren't great. And the amount of doubt and questioning that's some of it coming from me even that he's received, it was cool to see on a human level him do that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, Bob. I mean, you know, he's a guy that you just like you said. I mean, you want to root for him because of who he is. And the one thing I can say about this team, I'm a little surprised by this. I got to be honest. That locker room is a bunch of good guys.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and Rhys is, you know, one of the top ones there, but they're all that way. I mean, I don't look at that locker room and go, oh, he's a bad dude.
Yeah.
Or, you know, he's, you know, he doesn't fit or, you know, whatever. I mean, even guys who are slightly standoffish, like a Castellanos, for example. I don't get the sense that he's a bad guy.
Not at all. Not
right?
at all.
I just get that he's just, you know, it's the way he is with the media, and that's okay. But you look at him with the team, and like he's like right in, like he's one of the guys, like he's one of the boys, you know. Yeah. And I really get a sense.
He was going hard as hell last night.
Yes, yes, he was. Yes, he was.
And they were loving it too. They were loving it. You know who?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. Go ahead.
But that's the thing. Like, I mean, like you've been in locker rooms. I've been in locker rooms. There's always teams. There's always that guy or two on the team. You're like, yeah, whatever. This team doesn't seem to have that at all.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing. And, you know, it's one of the things that, you know, Middleton, went before he was talking to us, he was talking to MLB.com. And one of the things that or MLB Network, I'm sorry, not MLB.com, MLB Network. And one of the things that he was saying to them, you know, about how his involvement with the team, and he said, you know, I'm not a baseball guy. I don't really like to get involved. Obviously, I have to get involved when it comes to finances and things. He says, but where I feel like I can help is you know, with the culture. And when you hear him say that, and you see how he is with the fans, right? I mean, he's awesome with the fans. He's always outside taking pictures, inviting people up to his box, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And you see like how much it matters to him. And the Phillies have always had that family-like culture, belief, sometimes to a fault. But if you let somebody like a Dombrowski, who knows how to put a team together, and let him do his job, and at the same time you mold the culture and the feel around it, that's a really good combination of owner management, right? And so I give him a lot of credit for that. Because I think that a lot of the reason the guys in that locker room are the way they are, obviously it's Dombrowski and Fold and that group, of course, but I think Middleton has a lot to do with it too.
Yeah. No, I do give him credit for that. And one of the things that he's done, I actually think that John Middleton has sort of reinvented himself. Like the things that you're speaking to are probably always true.
Yes.
But he goes on his media tour and he wants to get his effing trophy back. An all-time quote. When you primarily drove the conversation, to be blunt, but like I chimed in and just said, like, you got your trophy there. You know, I know that's not the big one, and he like laughed and, you know, he said, yeah, like you got to get this one first though, before we get the next one. And like, I think that he's always wanted to win. I think that he's always tried to win. Obviously, he spent a ton of money. Even before he went over the luxury tax this year, he's been aggressive. He's tried to buy the Phillies out of some of their deficiencies. It had not worked in terms of return on investment. But one of the things I think he got trapped with was that, like, okay, he was taking ownership responsibility. He was trying to become like a voice sort of. And, you remember the potted plant comments at the press conference, and you just kind of were like, John, like, come on, like your heart is in the right place, but this isn't coming across the way that you want it to. Well intended, right? But just wasn't playing the way that you wanted it to. And now you see him out there. He's in the concourse talking to people. He's picking up balls at batting practice. He's a guy that, like, when you say like a guy really wants to win, like it's true. And he's doing the things that an owner, like if you're a Phillies fan, like you remember the guy back in the day, like I don't know if you remember this, it was kind of like an online meme at the time, but like felony fraud, like John Middleton should be arrested for felony fraud, for conning Phillies. That's all nonsense. I mean, John Middleton's a damn good owner, right? Not perfect, but a really good, well-intentioned owner, and you could see it on his face. Like you just like forget what he said, like because he talks a lot. But you could just look at his face and his eyes, and you could see how excited. It was like a 10-year-old boy, like the 10-year-old boy in him that like one day was going to be a baseball owner. Like he lit up the same way that a 10-year-old would have.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. 100%. And that's what I like about him. And I've always kind of like I've kind of defended him at times when I felt like it was. He just sounded bad publicly, but I kind of, like you just said, his intention was right, but it was just not the right time to say what he said. But there were times where I also felt that he was holding back unnecessarily, and I criticized him at those times. But yet, you see what's there, and you hear what's being said, and it's like, okay, well, he probably did the same thing with the last group. Right? With McPhail and with Klentak, probably did the same thing with those guys. Let them do their job, and he just, whatever does on his end. And they were just so bad at their jobs that it made him look worse. Right. And of course, hey, you're the top guy. You're always going to, that's where all the focus is going to be. You're going to get the blame, right? So I don't think he's changed how he's managed things. I just think that he's made better decisions with who's in charge of what, and it's that therefore made him look better, or at least made him look like the guy that he actually is, as opposed to people who aren't doing their jobs who make him look worse.
No, I agree with you on that. There are a couple other things on the list here. Unfortunately, I have a day job that I have to go attend to here shortly, but there are a few things I want to talk about. So maybe another 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Before we jump out of this. I mean, first of all, well, actually not first of all, but we'll get to the World Series in a moment. Because
we have to talk about the World Series?
Yeah, we actually have to talk about what's going to happen. But I just want to talk about Kyle Schwarber real quick, because we really haven't at all. Yeah. And he's a guy who's sort of been in the middle of everything here. I know that you, can't compare, as you said earlier, the Eagles to the Phillies. And they have to win 4 more games. And Kyle Schwarber's been here 1 year. And the player that I'm about to talk about has been here for the better part of 10 plus now. But don't you kind of just get like, I'll call it like the JV version. But if they go on to win a World Series and this guy has a couple more good games and hits a couple more long home runs, doesn't Kyle Schwarber sort of kind of give you Jason Kelce vibes a little bit? Like, don't you sort of feel like this is a dude that, like, a year, 2, 3, 4 years, the rest of his time here, like the rest of the 10, 15 years from now, like, we're going to be like, yo, Kyle Schwarber's back. Like, Kyle Schwarber's in town. Like, that's my guy. Like, I feel like we're cementing, like, you got the Schwarber Fest thing going with Wawa. Like, the dude is like kind of becoming this like cult hero sort of. And I know he has that standing in other cities. Like, I know he means a lot in Boston. I know he means a lot in Chicago. But I just feel like that this city, the way that they latch on to certain characters, I feel like we're trending that way with Kyle Schwarber.
Well, I think so. And I think what could cement him as a Philly guy more than those other cities. Yeah, he came up in Chicago. And yeah, he had that great playoff for them when they won the World Series. But he didn't play that whole season, right? He just came in there at the end and was, a stud in the end. he comes here and he's this team's Pete Rose in a lot of ways, in the sense that he knows how to win.
Make sure you clarify that.
Yes. He's this team's Pete Rose on the field in the sense that he comes in, shows the team how to win, shows individual players what makes them special, why those players are important to the team. Like I look at the reaction when Harper gets back to the dugout after the home run, and just watch when Schwarber gets to him. There's no fist pump thing. There's no pre-choreographed, celebratory thing. It's he gets into his face, he's pointing at him, and he's talking to him almost as if this was a discussion that they had, something that they had talked about. And he's really taken that role, that leadership role, that follow me to the promised land kind of thing.
Right.
And I think if it works, then he becomes that kind of legend here. And more so than he was in Chicago, more so than he was for his brief stint in Boston.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, I say he means a lot in Boston, but it's actually a credit to him. I mean, I think he played 40, 50 games. I'd have to look it up, but probably played 40 or 50 games in Boston. But just the brief time that he was there, a couple of big moments. I mean, people love the guy. People love the guy.
Yeah.
In Chicago, obviously, he's a hero. Just a dude, he's another guy, just observe, forget the locker, forget the post-game stuff, the quotes, he's kind of seems almost mild-mannered, he doesn't really project all that much. Watch him. Watch how much fun he has. If you see all the videos, we shared a bunch on Twitter, John Clark, a lot of people tweeting out videos in the locker room celebration last night. He's in the middle of that whole thing. He's dancing around. He's riding a bull after they leave. He's funny too. He doesn't really give you that. He doesn't give you that to the media, but he's they love that guy.
Is he the Phillies' Jason Kelce?
Yeah, that's what I'm that's kind of my starting point. That's what I'm saying. He might be that guy. If they have a parade, he might deliver that moment. He might take it to that level. So I really do see. I see some similarities there. I think Jason Kelce basically owns the city. You have to be special to do that, but there's the makings of it. We're in year one of a lengthy contract. They're in the World Series. He hits the ball a mile. There's makings of it. So before we get out of here, I mean, let's obviously talk about the World Series. I think have to hold ourselves accountable. We talked about losing to the Braves. We both like the Phillies. You had them in 7. I had them in 6. They do it in 5 against the Padres. I'm not going to sit here and say that the Phillies should win the World Series. I'm not. And in fact, if I had to financially invest in the outcome of it, I would take Houston. I would. The one thing you cannot deny, though, at this point, there's 2 things you can't deny. You can't talk yourself into Houston having a weakness. You just can't. They can pitch for days. They're 7 deep in their rotation. They can roll those extra guys in as bullpen pieces to an already stellar bullpen. They hit. They're clutch. They have experience. They have big-name players. But even though they're undefeated in the postseason, and even though I thought they were the best team in baseball all along, you do have to concede that the Phillies are playing with this, and I'm not going to call it house money. It's not house money. You're at the World Series, fucking go win it. But you know that this team is playing with some type of magic right now, with that belief in one another, that belief that we can do this. We're not going to lose. And when you watch Bryce Harper do what he did, elite level talent playing elite baseball in the biggest moments, there is no doubt in my mind that the Phillies believe that, we can go down to Houston, we can split the first 2, and we can come back here in Philly. And the way that we've played at home in front of these fans this postseason, there's no doubt in our minds that we can't get 2 out of 3 and send this thing back to Houston, and let's just see what happens. I believe that they truly in their hearts think that they can do this. And fuck it, maybe they can.
So you're our betting guy, right? Have you looked at the odds? for the World Series?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So right off the bat, obviously Houston's a big favorite. I'm looking at FanDuel, minus 180. Phillies are plus 150. Okay.
Yeah, DraftKings has them 185, 160. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's big. That's a big number for a World Series. But here's where it gets interesting to me, Bob. If you want to bet the World Series correct outcome, number of games, who wins the series. Houston, the favorite is Houston in 7 or 6. Both are plus 350.
That's correct.
Okay. The next best odds are Houston in 5, plus 400. Okay, fine. But then it gets to the Phillies. Plus 500 Phillies in 6, plus 550 Phillies in 7. And I think that they're in 6 is better than in 7 because that would be one of your two big guys pitching that game, right? In game 6. If it goes to game 7, maybe the matchup isn't as strong. So that's probably why the slight odds favorite there. But that's not that far off. That there's a better chance of the Phillies winning in 6 or 7 than getting swept by a team who has not lost a playoff game yet. I would think if it's that lopsided of a series, that the Phillies have a better chance than most people think. And I agree with you. I think they can get it back to Houston. I can't pick them.
Right.
I can't because there's just too big of a disparity in talent. I think this is a classic situation of a superior team against a less superior team, but the less superior team is riding emotion, and sometimes that comes through. And so therefore you can't dismiss it. But if Houston's had a cakewalk so far, and they kind of have, they're not going to have a cakewalk in the World Series. The Phillies are going to take them back to Houston. I think this thing can go 7, Bob. I really, really do. I really think that the Phillies have enough in them to get it to 7 games.
Are you at all concerned, or to what degree is it a factor that the Phillies will have 4 days off prior to the tipping of this, or the tip off of this series?
It would have been a factor to me if Houston kept playing. The fact that Houston also has that same time off, I think that levels the playing field a little bit.
That Houston team is tough. I got an opportunity to watch Game 4 last night when I got home from the stadium, and they get down 3-0 early, and you're like, hey, if you're the Yankees, like, you still have some talent here. You send it to Game 5, maybe you can get it back down to Houston, and you just never know, right? And they get up 3-0, and it's just boom, tie game, 3-3. I think it was Bregman. And
Pena hits the home run.
Pena hits the home run, yeah.
Right, yeah.
And then it's not just 3-3. Then they put 2 more guys on. Like, they just keep coming and coming and coming. And you get to the 7th inning, Yankees are holding 5-4. They actually, regain the lead after Houston ties it up and all. And then it's 2 in the 7th for the Astros, and it's over in 4. And you're just like, this team is unbelievable. And so that's when you start to just say, all right, take the emotion out of it, take what you just saw all out of it, and just look at the 2 teams. And you said, like you sized it up. How do you just can't. You can't give them the nod here.
Yeah, you can't. But I'll take Astros in 7 will be my pick. I'll ask you this, though. There's a curious decision the Phillies, I think the Phillies have. Are they going Wheeler game 1, or are they going to go Nola game 1?
So I talked to you about this weekend. You love to watch, and I know this is a big part of it. I mean, I told you at the NLCS, the way that the both teams were going to utilize their pitching was probably going to be a determining factor. And the Padres' passiveness yesterday, I think, killed them. I don't know. Like, my thought is, like, and I present your case, but my thought is, like, let's not overthink this. Zach Wheeler is one of the 3 best pitchers in baseball right now. Put him on the mound in game 1 and go out and try to get it. Like, use Aaron Nola in a position of drop the hammer in game 2. Like, but you got to go get one of these first 2. So for me, I want my best pitcher on the mound as soon as possible. That's the way I look at it.
The only question, and here's why I would consider going the other way. So Nola is going to get significant rest here, which is good. He's always good with longer rest, right? Wheeler, last 2 games on regular starts, on a regular rest, his fastball numbers start to dip after around 80 pitches, right? A little bit. And that's why they're pulling him out in the 6th inning. If you're a little worried about the bullpen against Houston, and I'm a little worried about the bullpen against Houston, I want to get those 2 guys, when they're pitching, to pitch as many innings as possible. Does it behoove you to give Wheeler that extra day to see if he can go a little bit longer, and knowing that when he's had the extra day of rest, his ERA is a full run lower?
Well,
and this also gets you Wheeler both times in Houston, where
you like Nola better at home.
I like Nola better at home, and I give him 1-1.
But if you do that, yeah, so it would be what, game 1 and 5, right?
Nola would be 1 and 5. Wheeler would be 2 and 6.
Yeah.
The only reason I sit there and say I would go Wheeler first is if it comes to a game 7 and it's all hands on deck for that game.
You bring him back, and
you could bring your game 5 starter back at the back end, and I'd rather have Wheeler throwing 99 than Nola, painting corners, right? I mean, just in that
makes
spot.
It's certainly a valid argument, and maybe one that they consider. I still presume they will go with Wheeler, but for the reasons that you've just talked through, it would not be. First of all, it wouldn't be crazy if they did it. Like, I wouldn't be blown away if they did it, and to be honest with you, from a logical standpoint, it makes some sense.
Yeah.
We shall see. I do wonder to any degree, like, Houston really didn't have anything to play for in that final series against the Phillies when they clinched, but they were playing their guys, like, that wasn't a, hey, stand down, go ahead, Phils type thing. That game that Aaron Nola threw against him, or that he threw against them, does that help him? Does that give him anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, it obviously has to give him a lot of confidence, right? But I think that there's something to that. And I also think that there's something to the matchups too. Like, you're going to get Verlander game 1. I just would rather Nola as a pitcher more than a thrower going against Verlander, and because I think Valdez is a tougher matchup on this lineup than Verlander is, because Valdez is going to be tough on Schwarber, and he's going to be tough on Harper, and he's going to be tough on Stott. So, like, I don't know. I like the notion of Nola pitching against Verlander and Wheeler pitching against Valdez. I think you match up styles a little bit better there too. Not that really means anything other than those pitchers pitch similarly, so therefore you hope for keep the game close. Keep the game within the same kind of game.
Right.
It gets hairy after that. I mean, Javier is a hell of a pitcher. McCullers, you saw last night, his breaking stuff is really good. I don't know what that Phillies lineup's going to be like against all that junk in game 4. But they didn't put a lefty in the bullpen for that series against the Yankees. Now, Yankees don't have any good lefties, and Phillies do. So they might change it up. Might they add a lefty to the bullpen for the Phillies series? Maybe. But they didn't. They went with all righties in the pen. It didn't hurt them. So
Yeah, well, we'll dive into the matchup here a little later in the week, and kind of break it down. But I think that's probably a good place to hit pause for now.
Yeah.
So I would recommend, I'll leave everybody with some advice here before we get out of here. Enjoy it. You know, like there's going to be plenty of anxiety over the weekend, probably right around Thursday night. You'll start to feel the stomach churn with a little anticipation. The next couple days, like watch the home run, go back and listen to Scott Fransky's call, talk to all your friends and your family members about where you were, what you did, how you felt, and really, really soak it in. I mean, it just is a thing that you think sometimes you fool yourself into thinking it could always be like this. I mean, I remember telling myself back in 2012 after they lost in the divisional round, I never thought that was it. I just thought they were the new Red Sox, and they just spend enough money and take all that Comcast money from the TV deal and just always figure it out. And then you blink and you go from being a 24-year-old asshole drinking with your friends at the bar to, covering a game and coming home and making sure that your baby's asleep. And like your whole life changes. So, take it all in while you can, right?
Yeah, and by the way, you didn't ask me about one last thing. I do have one last thing, but it's not a question. It's not a real discussion point. Well, it is a question. I'm gonna phrase it as a question, but it's not really a discussion point. Now, keep in mind, this is basing on my age. So I'm 48. Okay. So in my lifetime, where do the Phillies rank in the National League in pennants won?
So in 48 years.
Yes.
So, they won. So let's just do some quick math here. 80, 83, 93, 08, 09, 22. The 2022 Phillies won the National League pennant, by the way. Just want to point that out again. So what are we looking at? Is that 6?
That's 6.
So in 48 years, you win it 6 times. That's once every 8 years, which it feels like it's so much more like longer than that.
I know.
I will say that they're behind the Cardinals. They got to be like 3rd, 4th.
They're 3rd.
3rd.
Third most.
Dodgers and the Cardinals.
Dodgers have 8. Cardinals have 7. Phillies have 6.
How about that?
They're the third most prolific National League team when it comes to winning the pennant.
They're the gold standard, some would say.
I was stunned. Somebody sent that to me as a DM, and I was like, I would have said 6. It's probably like 5th or 6th. I really I would have dismissed quickly the other numbers, right? I would have just wouldn't even thought about it. But damn, I can't believe it. That's the third most in the National League.
Well, we keep talking about this drought and how long it's been. And I actually was thinking about the other day. I'm like, how you can always like take a sample size and make it work for an argument.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, if you go back to 07 and you fast forward to 22, you're talking about basically a 15-year runway, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, how many times have the Phillies made the playoffs in that 15-year runway? And you're like, all right, well, 07, 08, 09, 10, 11. So boom, right off the bat, you got what, 5 there?
Yeah.
And then they make it again in 22. So you go 6. You're like, 6 out of 15 years is actually like pretty good. That's almost close to half the span. But obviously that's totally front loaded. So
Sure. But this is a little bit longer. I'm a little bit longer in the tooth, right? So 48 years, 6 times to go to the World Series, 3rd most in the National League.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, everybody. Well, for Sir Anthony Sanfilippo, if you're watching this on YouTube, you may see that name tag there. I should have addressed that earlier.
It's all good.
I'm Bob Wankel. Thank you for listening to Crossed Up, and we will talk to everybody soon.